Hello and welcome to SQL Server Management Studio Tips and Tricks. My name is David Postlethwaite. I'm a database administrator for a large financial services company on the south coast of England. I've been working as a DBA since 2008 and I currently manage both SQL and Oracle instances. Previous to that, I was a developer using .NET, SQL, Access, FoxPro and Oracle, and way back in time I was a Windows and a NetWare administrator. I am an occasional contributor to the blog on gethanellis.com, and if you wish to contact me, my details are on the screen. Now, before we start looking at SQL Server Management Studio, I thought I should mention Azure Data Studio. This is a new tool for running SQL queries that Microsoft have been pushing quite hard, mainly because there are versions for Windows, Mac and Linux, whereas SQL Server Management Studio is only available for Windows. It used to be called SQL Operations Studio, but for Microsoft everything must now be linked to Azure, so they've renamed it. Microsoft describe it as a cross-platform database tool for data professionals using the Microsoft family of on-premises and cloud data platforms on Windows, Mac OS and Linux. If you watch any of the SQL 29 preview videos from Microsoft, you'll hear this statement touted several times at the start of every video. But once the presenters have run a couple of select statements using Azure Data Studio, they then tend to revert back to Management Studio because it still has all the features you need to manage SQL Server. Today we'll be looking at Management Studio 2017. SQL Server Management Studio 2016 and 2017 are no longer included on the SQL Server installation media. You will have to download it from the Microsoft website. It's free to download, and once installed it will check for updates, which are coming out virtually every month. Management Studio 2017 will work with SQL Server versions 2008 and above, including Azure SQL Database and Azure Warehouse. You can connect to earlier versions of SQL Server than that, but it's not guaranteed to be perfect. But you can install it alongside earlier versions of Management Studio if you need to. Right, that's enough waffle. Let's get on and start doing some demos. I've already started SQL Server Management Studio, and I'm sure this screen is very, very familiar to you. The Object Explorer tends to live on the left hand side. We can use this pin button to automatically hide it or to lock it in place. If we want to put it somewhere else, we can click and drag, and you'll then get these squares, so we could place it at the top of the screen if you wanted to. We could then, if we wish, make it a tabbed document. Then when we click on the new query button, we'll get our queries tabbed along with our Object Explorer. But I tend to find that people are very happy with the layout as it is. The most obvious time that you ever need to use this option is when you've accidentally undocked one of the windows. Now, over on the right hand side, if we want to rearrange the order of these, we could open up Properties, drag it out and put it back on the right hand side, and then it moves it to the bottom for us. Similarly, if we do the template browser, drag, drop, close it, and now I've got the Solution Explorer at the top, which is the one that I need. So I'm going to open up my Solution Explorer and pin it for a moment. I can then get to the queries that I'm looking for. So let's look at some of the features of Object Explorer. Obviously, this is where you manage your instances, where we can browse and view tables. We can start and stop our service from here if we like. We can see that here we have a little green arrow. I have Windows admin permissions on that server, so therefore Management Studio can check whether it's actually running or not and put a little green arrow on there. Now if we open up AdventureWorks, we'll see here in our tables list that we've got a huge long list of tables. We may only want to see certain tables, so we have the option here to filter. So I can put filter, I can say schema equals person, click OK, and I'll now only see the tables which have the person schema, which can make it very much easier for me to navigate. And we can do that not just with tables, with stored procedures, views, functions and the like, so we can limit what we want to see. Now if you want to hide the system views and the system tables and other system objects from people so that they can't accidentally start trying to edit them or view them or do anything with them, then we do have an option to do that. If we go to Tools, Options, Environment and Startup, there is an option here called Hide System Objects. If you turn that on, restart Management Studio, then all the system objects will no longer appear in the Object Explorer if you want to hide them. We also have the option here, we can choose what we want to open at the start. So most people will leave it on the default, which is Open Object Explorer, but you could get it to open a query window and activity monitor, or just open the empty environment ready for you. So you have a choice there. We need to restart Management Studio to see that, so I'm not actually going to do it at the moment, but you can try that if you need to. Now, I would imagine there are occasions when you want to find out some properties of your tables, such as how many rows are in each table, and obviously that can take quite a lot of effort if you need to go through all the tables looking for those properties. But we have an option called the Object Explorer Details. If I hit F7, we will bring up a list of properties about the tables that we are looking at. And if I right click on the menu up here, we can choose different columns. So if I chose, say, the row count, we instantly get a list of the row count. Now that's going to be a lot quicker than running select count star against every single table in your database, so you could save a lot of time doing that. We have similar information available on store procedures. If I click down here, we can see the date it was created, the owner, and again right clicking we can look at whether it's encrypted, when it was recompiled, and various other bits of information. And similarly with views, we can have something very similar again, where we can see information on the views. Right click, we can see whether it's when it was last modified. So we do get a certain amount of useful information from Object Explorer. Definitely worth something remembering if you need to quickly look up, say, the creation date of a table or when it was last modified, to check it without having to look through different system tables. Now I came across this one only recently. I hadn't appreciated it was here. If I just shut down the tables and the views and the programmability to make it a bit clearer, if you right click on a database, go to Reports, go to Standard Reports, there's a whole host of reports here which can give you information about your database. So if we click on disk usage, for instance, we get a very nice graph showing how the data is spread around our database. And there's a whole host of reports, as you saw, such as disk use by partition, disk use by table, blocking transactions, transactions by age. So if you don't have any bespoke software for looking at the performance of your database, this might be quite a useful place to start. It's not as good as some of the tools that you can buy from different third-party vendors, but it's not a bad place to start if you're looking for useful information about how your indexes are being used and the like. So do have a look at those reports if you've never had the chance to look at them. Now sometimes you want to be able to generate a complete script for your database. You want to be able to script the whole thing out. Maybe you need to recreate it somewhere else on a different server. You don't want to have to back it up and restore it, but you want to create a scripted version of it. If we right click on the database, go to Tasks, and down here we have the option called Generate Scripts. From here, if we give it a moment to load, it will go through the database. We can now select either the whole thing, or maybe we just want to script out the tables, or maybe just the store procedures or the users. We can choose which bit we wish to script out. Click Next. We can script it to a file. We can script it to multiple files. We can write it to the clipboard or to a new query window. But the Advanced button here is really interesting. We can script out numerous extra options. So if we come down and look at this, we can script out the drop and create. So it will then write the drop and create options into all our tables, or maybe just the drop. Maybe you're trying to write something to drop certain bits. We can choose what version of SQL Server it will write to. We can add the logins as well. We can script out the owner. And one very nice one here, we can script out the data as well as the schema. And in that case, it will actually write insert statements for every single row in the current database. So obviously be careful if you're scripting this out. If there is important data in your database, that you're not including it in that script if it's not going to be held securely. And if you've got billions of rows in your database, then this is probably not the option to use. But if you have to write scripts for releases and updates to the applications that you're using in your company, then this might be a way of being able to do it. I'm not going to run it because it does take quite a while, obviously, to script out the whole of AdventureWorks, but it is there if you want it. The toolbars, just like any other Windows program, you can add or take away from the toolbars, but I do find that the buttons that are on the toolbars that appear for the different things within Management Studio are as good as you're going to get. So probably like Word and Excel, you're not altering your toolbars very much. Now, a new option that came in Management Studio 2016 is this one up in the top right hander called Quick Launch. And the idea of this is you can type in a word and it will find the option for you to save you having to go through the menu. So if I type in File, all the options to do with File come up. But if I type in File Open, it will take us to all the ones with File Open, and then I can select or I can carry on typing in and find the one I'm after. And this is called the Quick Launch bar. Whether it is quicker or not, I don't know, but we can type in anything and it will try and offer options for us that meet that requirement. I think once you get the hang of it, then it will probably be more useful if you prefer to type in rather than using the mouse. Whereas if you're using Management Studio typing lots of code, then there's a good chance you could just go Control Q, type in the command, and it'll open up the window for you. So do have a go at the Quick Launch button and see whether it helps you or not in your use of Management Studio. Now, query window, we've all used query window. We all know that we can just select and execute. We can hit F5. If you want to change to a different database, obviously we can click up here, or you can use the Control U option, which will take you up to that window, and then you can use the arrow key if you wish to change your database. Now, by default, output always goes to a grid, but you can send your output to other options. If I right click and look at results 2, I can send it to text instead. So now when I run my query, we get a text output, which may or may not be useful. You can copy and paste that into another document. We also have the option to send results to file. If you're wanting to create a file, then we can do that. Now, by default, your file output will create an output like this, as shown here in your text file, but we can change that. If I right click again on here and go to query options, and I come down here to text, we can include various options, but up in the corner here we have the option to create a comma delimited file, a tab delimited, space delimited, or a delimiter of your own choice. So if you need to output a table to a CSV, maybe this is one way to do it, rather than writing some code to a link server or something to a text file. We can just do it via the query output option. Let me switch back to grid, because that's the one that we are most used to. And there we go. And you all know that you can copy and paste quite easily from here. Just right click, copy with headers, and you can copy and paste that into Excel. I think we're all aware of that. Now, when we have our list of tables, I'm sure you've all done this. You've right clicked on a table and gone select top 1000 rows, which naturally returns the top 1000 rows of your table. Now, did you know that we can change this 1000 value to something else? We don't have to be stuck with 1000 rows. If we go Tools, Options, come down here to SQL Server Object Explorer, go to Commands. Here we can specify select top 1000 rows. We can change that number. And for those that use the edit option, you can change the 200 rows as well to a different number if it more suits you. So don't be stuck with top 1000 rows. You can change that to a different number. Now when we run our queries, I'm sure you've used all these options. Pass will actually check the syntax of your code. It will actually check that the commands you're putting in are correct, rather than the fact you're querying a table that doesn't exist. It's not checking that the table exists, it's just checking that the syntax is correct. But we can turn on show the execution plans. I hope you're all looking at our execution plans regularly. We can also turn on client statistics. So when we now execute my query, we will get extra values there. We can turn off our pane at the bottom with the Control R and turn it back on again, or we can use F6 to move between. If you don't want to click, we can do that. And as you've seen, when we right click and go to query options, there's all sorts of things that we can choose to set. You can even change Go to something else. If you don't like Go, you can change it to a different value. Obviously, if you then pass your code to someone else who hasn't got the right batch separator, then you could end up in a mess. So I'm not sure anyone's actually ever tried changing that. Now, one of the clever things that came in Management Studio 2016 is something called Live Query Stat. So here I can select a query, and we have this button with a little tick on it. If I click on that and execute my query, we actually get the execution plan running in real time. We can actually watch it transferring the data across to our final select. Now this particular query is going to take a long time, so we're never going to see it finish. But this might be one way of having a look at your long-running queries and trying to see which particular operator in your query is causing the backlog. Now I hope most of your queries will be so fast that this won't actually display anything, because it will finish almost immediately. And I did read when this first came out that people were worried that developers would start writing their code to go slower so they could actually sit and watch all the little insects crawling across the screen. So that is a useful feature or not. I will leave you to decide. So we're going to stop that because it's going to take too long to run. Now, new into Management Studio 2016 and 2017, let me just auto-hide this for a minute. In this particular case, we have a very long query. We don't want to keep having to drag one end to the other to keep checking a bit of it. Up here, we have a little symbol. If we pull that down, we get two independent query windows. So I can now scroll down to the bottom, work on this bit, and if necessary, come back up to the top and work on that bit. Exactly the same query window, but two different views of it, which could help you speed up your development if you are working on a very long query window like this one. When you've finished, we can simply drag this back up to the top and it goes back to one query window. So it's this little symbol over here, drag that down and it will become two windows for you. Another new feature that came in 2016 on our query window, you'll notice that there are some colors appearing in our scroll bar, and these correspond to particular things on your query. So where we have red, that means there are parts of the code that aren't correct and are actually getting underlined. So we can then drag down and see, there we are, I've added a error into my code and it's highlighted it in red. If I change that, maybe I'll just put a comment on it for the moment, it now disappears and you'll see, not very clear unfortunately, there is now a yellow marker there to show that that is that particular line of code has changed since I loaded the query. Now you'll also get other colors appearing depending on exactly what has changed, and the colors can't be changed unfortunately. Now if I right click on the scroll bar and go to scroll bar options, we can choose which things we want to see. So I've just been looking at show changes and show errors. There's also one called show marks and show the current position of our cursor, which is the blue line. We also have this option called use map mode instead of bar mode. If I click on show map mode and click OK, we now get a small display on the right hand side of all our code. If we put the mouse over the code, we can then see what it looks like in a little window, and if that's the bit we're looking for, we can then click and it will take us to that bit of code. You may find this very useful if you've got a very long query, to be able to scroll up and down and find, that's the bit I want, let's click, without having to go and read the code. So you may find that a useful option for maneuvering around a query window. So let's shut that one down. A further few things about the query window that you may not be aware of. If we want to build up a query, obviously we can type it in, but we can also just drag objects onto the screen. So I could say use and then drag AdventureWorks next to it. I could open up address table and get to the columns, and I could say select address line 1, just drag it from person.addresses. So we can drag and drop things onto the screen. Another useful thing, how many times do you see an error message saying error at line whatever da-da-da? How do we know what line number we're on? Well, go to Tools, Options, go to Text Editor in General. We have an option here to say Show Line Numbers. We also have an option to word wrap. If you don't want to have your lines going off the edge of the screen, it can word wrap for you just in the same way you can in a lot of text editors. So if we click OK, we've now got the line numbers that we need to go to, and we can use Control G to go to a particular line. So in this case it's not very long, so I can go to line 9, which is on the same page, but it'll move that up there. Now another useful feature is something called Bookmark. Maybe there are lines in your long code again that you want to get to. So if I go back to my scroll bar code, I have all this. I may want to put a bookmark on it, and that will allow me to go there quickly. So if I go up to Edit and Bookmarks, we can place a bookmark using the Control K. So if I say here, I can go Control K, and it will place a bookmark on there. Maybe if I come down to the bottom, I can come here and go Control K, and that's now put a bookmark on it. If I come up here and go to bookmark window, I can now see all the bookmarks that I've created. I can move between the bookmarks. So I can now jump to that bookmark. I can now jump to that bookmark. And again, there are control keys that allow us to do that as well. If I go back to bookmarks, I can jump to the previous one, Control KP, Control KN. We can clear down the bookmarks. If you have multiple query windows open, it can even move through all the bookmarks in the different query windows as well. So that might help you to mark points you need to come back to, and then you can use the bookmark to move to them.